schools. Additionally, we have something that we started here in Ohio that I'm a founding member of called the Ohio STEM Learning Network. The Ohio STEM Learning Network is a coalition of STEM schools and STEM pathway schools in the state of Ohio. So the number of places that I could point you to are vast from Ohio, but I'm also a founding member of the STEMx, which is a national group working on STEM implementations in schools all across the country. So I hope to bring that information to you, and I hope that it is something that is useful over time. So what I have for you to start out with is a little bit like a level set of what it is that we did to get STEM pathways started here in Central Ohio. Central Ohio is a region that has about, I don't know, 135,000 students in several districts. If you extend it a little bit further outside of Franklin County, you're probably in the 1 million student range. So it's a large region, it's a heavy populated region. It's a region that has a lot of economic diversity. We have a lot of industries that have closed, but we have not been hit quite as hard as an urban center as many other cities across the nation, because we do have a large number of large businesses that are like insurance companies. Actually, we have more insurance companies here than anywhere in the country. So like insurance companies, they tend to be a little bit more resilient in recession and not manufacturing based. So that's a little bit about the region. What we had to work with for our pathways work is we have, for a strong economy in Ohio, we needed to really look at getting our citizens to have a career certificate or a college degree. It's necessary for us to remain economically viable for this to occur, and we're using Illumina targets to help us to try to get to a 60%. So by 2020, 59% of the jobs are going to require, and we're positive on this one, a career certificate or a college degree, either a 2- or 4-year degree. We know that right now we only have 36% of our adults with an associate's degree or higher, and there's a 23% skills gap in Ohio. So that was facing us before we started our pathways work with Jobs for the Future. We want to make sure that when we are targeting our work that we're looking at those kinds of issues for the region. So specifically in Central Ohio, we were looking at what does it take for our large employers to want to hire someone, and what are the areas in which there are the highest needs where they're not finding a lot of people to replace or fill in for the jobs with enough quality for them to be sustainable hires. So we wanted to make sure as we were working that we were doing it through education. And so our friends at Jobs for the Future assisted us in procuring a state grant to help our schools to think a little bit more deeply about pathways. And in particular, we found advanced manufacturing, engineering, and health were 3 of the areas where we had a high need. IT was the next one. And these are all STEM related, so it helped us to be able to also push our STEM initiatives and goals. So that's a little bit of the demographics by county in the state of Ohio. I don't think we need to go over that, but the ones that are particularly focused for in our pathways work are Delaware, Franklin, Licking, Madison, and Union. Those are the counties that are in our Central Ohio region, and you can see there I've circled what the attainment rates were, and we got this information through our work with the Illumina Foundation. So we know that there hasn't been a lot of real in-depth STEM research with regard to workforce development. We know that the ones that have happened didn't really target the blue-collar and technical jobs that require STEM knowledge. So we went about having the Brookings Institute in collaboration with Battelle Institute here in Columbus, Ohio, and several other entities across the country to try to figure out what the hidden STEM economy was. And then we made parlays from that hidden STEM economy into our region. So the slide that I have for you right now is what is overall for the nation, and then we went more specific here inside of the Central Ohio region. Is everybody seeing everything okay?
Yep, it's fine.
All righty. So part of our work was about marshaling resources that are, now again, we're focusing on what we're doing from an education standpoint, but marshaling our resources. We have a lot of entities out there doing really great work, but they aren't necessarily connected to one another. And so because they're not necessarily connected to one another, they don't always play in the sandbox in a really streamlined way. So we have something called the Central Ohio Compact. Higher ed, business and industry, and our K-12 all met together to formulate an idea or an agreement about what our goals are for this region. What you see on the slide right now are the success results that we as a group came up with just prior to launching our Pathways work. So now we're getting even more granular about what it is that we want to do, and we're doing it with multiple partners. Now I will say, and I think my friends at JFS can concur, this is not easy work, and there's fusses and misunderstandings all over the place, but it is getting us some things that we hadn't had in the past. So our student success results were to increase the number of students earning a post-secondary credential, to assure that all college-bound high school graduates are college-ready, to increase the number of high school graduates with credit toward a post-secondary credential. So these are the agreements that we have. We had over 200 different entities that were in agreement for this, everybody from nationwide insurance through our largest hospital system, which is Ohio Health. So we had all of these entities and all of the school districts in Central Ohio all coming together with higher ed, all of our higher eds in the region, and saying, yes, this is what we want to do, and we want to focus our resources this direction wherever possible. Partnerships matter in this. We want to make sure that we can give access and opportunity in an equitable way to students who might not have that in any other way, particularly focusing on first-generation college goers. And we wanted to increase the number of community college transfer students earning a bachelor's degree in the 2+2 or a 3+1, depending upon their program. From an economic impact, we want to make sure that we have a highly skilled workforce, which I alluded to before, and we wanted to make sure that we attract even more entities to come in and want to do their business here in Central Ohio because of the work that we're doing in collaboration with one another. So far, what I've given you is the idea that we had, one of the mechanisms by which we can marshal resources, and then some more granular work that we are going to do for our pathway. So we worked with the state of Ohio and were successful in getting a very large grant to work with, I don't know, 11, I think, school districts of the in all over Central Ohio, all with different demographics, to look at rigorous academic and career pathways. And we are and have been under implementation for the last 4 years. So we want early, sustained career counseling and information. We want engaged employers. We want to make sure there's an intermediary that links the education and the employer, and we wanted to make sure that we have committed state leaders and favorable policy environment. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the policy environment and the kinds of things that we did in order to make this work more likely to succeed. In the state of Ohio, prior to our work and our lobbying, the students who participated in college course attainment prior to exit of high school did it through something called a post-secondary educational option. And individual school districts could decide whether they pass that cost off to the students or not, and it could be as high as whatever it is that the college chose to charge, which could be their regular tuition for on-campus students. And so it discouraged, quite frankly, a lot of kids from being able to participate, and it actually was inequitable for students who had no money and couldn't participate. And so we successfully lobbied for legislation called College Credit Plus. College Credit Plus was enacted 2 years ago, In March, we'll be on starting our 3rd year. But College Credit Plus mandated that schools pay for students who are eligible to take college coursework in the state of Ohio, that the school district pays the tuition for the students, and that they were not able to discourage or dissuade a student from taking coursework if they are eligible. So that enabled us to push forward with our latest initiative inside of this Pathways work, which is our early college work with I3, also with Jobs for the Future. So our partner has been Jobs for the Future the whole way through. That allows us to have the consistency so they know where the pitfalls have been, and they also know where the successes lie so that they can encourage us to move forward faster. So in this latest iteration, again, I'm just trying to level set for what it is that we're talking about. In this latest iteration, we have some of our lower performing schools with high economic need demographics, and we're working on transitioning and transforming to early college in all of them. And so this particular grant is a federal grant. It's an I3 grant. So there are all different kinds of conditions, but we are demonstrating through replication of other people's good research and work, primarily through the early college work at Jobs for the Future. So in that case, we're not really inventing new things. We're deploying existing structures and strategies that work really well. One of them is called the Common Instructional Framework. And the Common Instructional Framework helps us on our readiness side to be able to know what students need in order to be adept at transitioning into college coursework, and how our high school and actually middle school and high school teachers can help the students to close gaps and get better preparation and a better preparation schedule so that gaps close more quickly and that they can access college coursework earlier. Our target for this is that we want to make sure that our students have access to college coursework through College Credit Plus, that they leave high school with a credential and or college coursework toward either a 2+2, a 2-year degree, or a credential in college. So we want them to have the success things that I talked about that the Compact asks for through this particular grant, but we want large numbers. So our target is 90% of all students in year 5. So that's kind of my level set of what it is that we're trying to do. I know it's a lot and it has a lot of different contexts, but I'd like to clarify anything before we move on to the specifics of the pathway, if that's okay. So if anybody has any questions, or if you have any clarifications that you need, I'd be happy to assist.
Hey, Marcy, it's Joel.
Hi, Joel.
Hey, this is great so far, and you have an interested group of participants, so I want to let them lead. But I want to encourage you as you go along to maybe, emphasize the important roles of different local partners who have been instrumental in keeping this work going. I agree, it's very hard, and you're doing the hardest and heaviest lift along with your partners. But the community college, different districts that have been involved, et cetera, just different players, even other community partners. If you could speak to that at some point, if not touch upon it now, as you go through, I think that would be really terrific.
Sure, I can actually talk about it right now, if you would like. One of the things that we thought was really important is that we want to make sure that we're as comprehensive as possible. Now, with comprehensive as possible, you get a lot of different opinions and a lot of different ideas, and it's like herding cats at times. But here are the primary indicators of what we think is going to be a successful partnership. In each of these school sites, we have a higher ed partner. We have, and actually in our STEM schools across the state, we have a higher ed partner who is committed to helping and assisting in the transformation of both the school and itself to be able to encourage participation from all kinds of students in all kinds of ways. There's a partnership with either a group of businesses or a single individual business, and then there's the K-12s, and those partnerships are specifically targeted toward assisting a particular school or high school. So, Joel, that was a great reminder. I'll describe one instance, actually two instances. One of them is South High School here in Columbus, Ohio. South High School has been persistently low achieving for as long as we've been measuring achievement by school. In the state of Ohio, we call it school report card. So it's a persistently low achieving school. It is 100% free and reduced lunch. It has a lot of the demographics of first-generation college going that you would see in typical urban environments. So with their work, we're just starting our work with South High School, but with them, we thought, let's do as much local work as we can. So their major partner is called Nationwide Children's Hospital. It's the largest children's hospital in the state of Ohio, but it also happens to be in the backyard of the school itself. And so from a workforce development standpoint, the students who are going to school there, their parents may work there, or if they don't work there, they bring their children there, and if they don't just bring their children there, they see it every day when they drive or walk by. So as you know, with most hospital systems, they're like small cities. They have business, they have manufacturing inside, they make their own saline bags, so they make and fill their own saline bags. They have research going on, they have the healthcare, they have, you know, it's like a functioning city. They have food service, they have everything. So from an experience standpoint, we thought that would be a good partner, and all partners agreed to South High School because of A, proximity, and B, what all they could offer. So in that case, we have South High School, which is a 7 through 12 school. So they have a middle and high school in one building. We have a committed industry partner, which in this case is Nationwide Children's Hospital. We have a committed college, which is Columbus State Community College. And then we have some outside supporters that are working on more of the social and emotional needs of the students. Right now, they have 17 entities that work with students at South High School, either for tutoring, for life skills, for basic needs, for a variety of different social, emotional, and life-sustaining issues. Boys and Girls Clubs, all different kinds of churches are all there helping and supporting and tutoring students at South High School. But what had happened for South prior to now is that they had, somebody said, hey, we want to tutor some students. They said, okay. And then somebody else said, hey, we want to provide meals for students when they go home. And they said, okay. And everybody was working really hard, but they weren't working hard necessarily on helping the student to be able to get somewhere. Just to maintain is not bad, but we want to make sure that they were also working toward getting somewhere. So that, like the tutoring example, they were tutoring based on whatever the student said they needed, but not necessarily knowing what the overall outcomes need to be for the student. So a lot of things have to, this is transformational for schools, so a lot of things have to go into place in order for that to happen. And they did not have any way of really tracking data inside of that school. So we formed another partnership with Battelle. Battelle is a large research organization here in Central Ohio. Actually, it's the largest in the world, nonprofit research organization. So we worked with them to develop an alert system called Learning Circles so that they can start to track data. So that's an example of how our partners are all working together for South High School, and it's just beginning. But their pathways that they're building are all STEM pathways. They're all in healthcare, science, technology, engineering, IT, mathematics. So that's what they're doing, that's how they're forming, and in 5 years, they anticipate that 90% of their kids would be employable with a certificate or on their way to a 2- or 4-year degree. And we're doing that through coaching with JFF, our partner for that. We're doing it through assistance in the college going and college access from the college, I'm the Educational Service Center. I'm representing the Educational Service Center who's trying to help them to get their instructional practices with wraparound services, so it's a combined effort moving forward. Joel, did I start to trip into some of the things that you were interested, that you think everybody would like to hear?
That was awesome. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any clarifiers? It's always hard when we have webinars because you don't know if you're serving people's needs or not serving people's needs. So I encourage you at any time to jump in and ask a question or to, raise a flag or do whatever it is that you need to do, because my goal is to assist and help everyone who's on the call as best as we can. So I'll leave that to you guys. I'll ask one more time, is there anything that I can clarify for anybody? Okay. Oops, I went the wrong way. So the next thing to talk about are some examples of how the pathways are look, sound, and feel. I'm going to go to a spreadsheet here in a minute to show you what some course progressions are, but I thought what I'd do first is to describe a specific academic and career pathway that's 9 through 14 that has been put in place over the last 4 years that is STEM focused. The program that I'd like to talk about is called Bodies, and Bodies is a pathway that is in partnership with the K-12, primarily high school, Ohio State University, Wexner Medical Center, which is Ohio State Medical Center, and Nationwide Children's Hospital. So students who participate in this particular program, in the 9th and 10th grade, they work really diligently for their college readiness to be placed into college coursework. So that means that the students who are working, I'll take one of the schools that's participating in Bodies Pathway, that's HS Squared in Reynoldsburg. This is an academy with about 440 students who is focused on health pathway access. Now, health pathway is pretty broad and wide. So it could be everything from phlebotomy credential all the way through to being a neurosurgeon. So there's this huge, giant range of things, health information technologies, some computer science work that they do through virtual reality. There's a lot of different components that are places where a student may find interest. So what we do is we look at it kind of like a meta major. So this is an area of interest for students. They've all selected to do this. I should qualify that in Reynoldsburg, every student needs to choose a pathway, one meta major, before they enter the 9th grade. So they have schools that are focused to experience an exposure inside of that pathway. It's a wall-to-wall system, 2 campuses, 4 academies. So HS Squared is Health Sciences and Human Services. Get it? 2 H's and 2 S's. So Health Sciences and Human Services, working in the Bodies program, here's what the students do. In the 9th and the 10th grade, and I'll show you in a minute on a spreadsheet how this works. In the 9th and the 10th grade, the students take English 9, English 10 in the 9th grade. They take English 11, and then if they qualify, they take Comp 1101 with Columbus State Community College. So they are in their progression moving through their English language arts requirements for high school in the 9th and the 10th grade. So here's a place where I'm going to ask if you have any questions about that, because it's very different in a construct from most schools, because they take 9th grade and 9th grade, 10th grade and 10th grade, 11th grade and 11th grade, and 12th grade and 12th grade. So what kinds of questions do you have about that, and do you want me to explain that a little bit further?
Hi, Marcy. This is Takia.
Hi.
I would just love to know, in thinking about the young people, the students that are taking these courses, what has been the preparation to make sure that they are ready to be able to take classes that are above their grade level? Is there any selection? Is there anything that's done prior to them coming to the school to make sure that they have the ability to do that?
That's a great question. So the schools are open by choice, so there is no entry requirement for any of the academies. There are 5 middle schools that feed the 4 academies. So one of them is an elementary that goes through 8th grade, and then there are 4 middle schools. So they have a variety of preparations and preparation schedules, but it is inside of the same district. So the preparation, although it might be varied by deployment, it's not necessarily varied by standard. They follow the state standards for grade level implementation. So you get a mixed bag when they come in because it's totally open by choice. And so here's how we develop it. When the student comes in, we use, or actually I was there, so I keep saying we. The HS Squared uses a universal tool to help to assess where the students are in English and math, actually English, math, and science. And that tool is called NWEA MAP, Measure of Academic Progress. And so when the student comes in, they come in and they're enrolled in English 9. The teachers then are given information about what their strengths and weaknesses are, and they can group students to close gaps very easily because they have a lot of really robust information. It's a nationally normed assessment, so they can also see where the students are in comparison to everybody across the country. But what it also does is it allows us to plan for the acceleration. So this is where, and Jobs for the Future does a really good job of talking about, we're not talking about remediation for students, we're talking about acceleration points. When is it that we're going to be able to best accelerate for you as an individual? That's when you should be able to move forward. So what we ended up having to do in all of the academies in Reynoldsburg is move to a mastery system. That means that when a student is able to master content, actually content standards and skills, they are able to move on to the next thing. So they block the courses by semester. So I'll take a student through it, and that might help to clarify it. So my name is Marcy, and I'm starting in the 9th grade. I took my MAP assessment, and they found that in English, math, and science, I was pretty typical to grade level. So I would enter into English 9. I wouldn't necessarily be put into any other academic assist for English because I was pretty typical to where everybody else is in the country entering into English 9. While I'm in English 9, my teacher can see what I'm already strong in and what I'm weak in. And let's say that I had some writing deficits as an example. I was pretty good at reading comprehension. I was pretty good at vocabulary, but my writing conventions weren't necessarily up to par. So the teacher knows that and can tailor the instruction towards that with me and any other student who has that gap when it comes time to talk about writing, so that they can have small group work that might be a little bit different than everybody else, but we're all working on the same standards. They're just trying to close the gap that I might have through practice. So let's say that I am in the class, the teacher's differentiating from me, and at the end of the semester, I'm assessing myself, I'm assessed by NWEA MAP, and I'm also assessed using an end-of-course exam. The state of Ohio requires that students pass an end-of-course exam. So I will get my teacher and I will have some indicators because I'm going to take the NWEA to decide whether or not I'm ready for the end-of-course exam. If the NWEA indicates that I'm not ready for the end-of-course exam, I'll stay in English 9 for the next semester. It's blocked, so I have 85 minutes, and I should be really good to go with English 9 and some of English 10 by the end of the school year, but I'm not yet ready to move on to English 10. Some of my friends tested well, they are assessed by their teachers well, they're ready for the end of course exam, they take the end of course exam, and they move on to English 10. So for me, the intervention for me is that I get more time with no penalty by grade to stay in the course, which is typical for everybody else to finish at the end of ninth grade coursework. What we found was happening when we implemented this mastery system for early college access, what we found happened is that more students were ready than what we anticipated. So if we were to register a guess, we didn't really guess, but if we were to register a guess, realistically we thought maybe 30 or 40% of the kids would meet mastery and be able to move on. That was not the case. We were at 55% the first year, and they're at 75% right now. You know, so the kids were meeting the rigorous standards by using the strategies, the common instructional framework strategies, but they're meeting those strategies. We didn't have that framework yet, but we were using many of those strategies for early college. The students are able to actually do it, and they're actually able to do it at a much faster clip than what we had anticipated. So the students that were ready moved on to English 10, and in the ninth grade, they would have finished English 9 and English 10. We doubled up math in the same way. So the students, some of them may have taken algebra, some of them took math 8, some of them took geometry. They were all over the map. But wherever they came in, whatever their placement was, we used NWEA map to find out where they were, what their gaps were, what we needed to do to close those gaps. And then the instructional strategies were differentiated for the students, using a high degree of accountable talk, using a high degree of literacy strategies, grouping students well so that they were entering into their zone of proximal learning instead of having something that's too difficult or too easy. All of those constructs were really important to us to help the students move. So we ended, if you look at the group now, and it's also mirrored at a school called Metro Early College STEM High School, the majority of the students are able to complete English 9, English 10, and English 11 before they exit 10th grade. And they're able to complete 3 math courses prior to exit of 10th grade. Some of them earn 4. Some of them earn 4. So what you stop talking about are graduation requirements, because the students are actually doing more than what they had anticipated doing and what they would have expected to do prior to entering into the school. You know, you think, oh, I got 4 years, I'll take my time, I'll do whatever. When you're aspirational and your college-going culture is there, students start to want to do it more and more and more, and they actually end up pushing the staff to try to find ways to make sure that this happens for them.
Well,
so I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, and I apologize for cutting you off. But so in the light of that, what have been the instructional supports and the professional development offered to the teachers as they moved to this new system and way of really thinking about curriculum and working with small groups?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I'll describe the one where I was a principal the longest, and that's Metro Early College STEM High School. For Metro Early College STEM High School, we had professional development in concert with Jobs for the Future through their early college initiative. Now, this is quite some time ago. We started Metro Early College STEM High School in 2006. You know, so it's been quite some time, and things have evolved. The Common Instructional Framework as one of them. The rubrics were being developed, I believe, at that time, if I'm correct, Joel. So we were using the construct. We were working with the I'm sorry, Sarah?
Yes, I was going to say yes. We think that's correct. Yep.
So we were using the frameworks back then to be able to help and make sure that the school was able to move forward. At that time, an organization called Knowledge Works Foundation had contracted with Jobs for the Future for early college strategies. And Jobs for the Future was assisting through coaching. So one of the strategies for professional learning was coaching, so assistance through coaching. A second strategy that was in place for us while we were developing our constructs, so to speak, that was in place was work with the college. So from a novice standpoint, it might not, if you're in K-12 all the time, you might not realize how important partnership with your higher education partner is. But there's a lot of misconceptions that occur between these two systems that can't be bridged unless you have real and robust conversations on a regular basis between them and that they're facilitated. And part of my role was to make sure that that happened. And at Metro Early College STEM High School, the entity was The Ohio State University. Now, I don't know about you guys, but large universities are tough. You know, so there's, I think, 60,000 residential students at The Ohio State University, and they have, when we say bureaucracy, we're talking about a component of Ohio State. So it was really important at the beginning that we had this collaborative effort that was in conjunction with one another. And it actually helped us when we got to the point where we wanted to get bigger with our Central Ohio Compact, because Ohio State helped to lead that. So what we did is we met with each of the deans that were in charge of content or whole colleges, and we talked about what are the entry points for students. So our example, we selected that we wanted students because we were STEM focused, and we know that to be successful in college, calculus is very important for many of the STEM fields. We said that our first entry into college coursework was going to be calculus for science majors. The number there is 1152. So Calc 1152 was our target. So then we met with the calculus professors lots of times, and this was not the easiest thing to do, but we met with them pretty regularly to try to diagnose what is it that students need to come in with. And then once they articulated what that was, at first they were saying they need to take AP Calc before they come. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're not going that direction because we don't want to duplicate things that you're already doing. So I kind of was, I'm a math teacher, so I kind of chuckled in my head when they said that because they didn't know that I was a math teacher. In any case, we chose 1152 in partnership with one another. And then once we articulated what it was that the students had to know and be able to do, then we started to say, where are the pitfalls for kids who are ready for this class? Where do they get tripped up? Where do they end up failing in college? And they had never done a diagnostic about calculus at Ohio State to find out what was causing kids not to persist to completion with a C or better. And so the College of Ed at Ohio State put a couple grad assistants in to try to figure out, we actually did it for calculus, biology, and physics. And so they started to find out what are the characteristics of things that the students didn't have. Well, what they didn't have in place was not shocking. A lot of it was about the softer skills about college knowledge, like how do you manage your time? What do you mean? What do they mean when they say it's homework is optional? They don't mean that it's optional to do. They mean it's optional to come in and get help with. You know, so getting the language down, making sure we knew what it was that students needed, caused us to develop a student success course with Ohio State University for all of the students in our pathway at Metro Early College. That particular course is still being used across the region for high schoolers getting ready to take college coursework, and it is a construct that we're using in our current grant with I3 with Columbus State Community College, although it's new to them. So to help to make sure that the students were ready and sustainable, we also knew that we needed to know how students matriculate through the college and who helps them do that. And so knowing that the college relies heavily on advisors, actually each college in Ohio State University relies on advisors to help their students, we went ahead and hired one of their advisors and split the cost for that person between the college, between Ohio State University and ourselves. And we're implementing that deployment strategy right now in our I3 grant for our other schools because it worked. So what her job was, She needed to monitor what we were doing from a curriculum standpoint in preparation, what the students were doing when they got into the classes, and then looking to see if the gaps that we thought we wanted to close prior to entrance, if they were persisting as gaps. So now she's checking on individual students that we have in combination with one another. So we have somebody that's monitoring their progress in the college coursework. From a school perspective, a lot of people say, well, geez, that would cost a ton of money. It actually was it was using my resources differently. It was no more money for me to do that than it was to hire a whole bunch of counselors. I'm not discounting the role of a counselor. I had a counselor, actually I had a counseling system with Ohio State and interns, but I had counselors, but this is a different role. And I chose, rather than to expand more counseling, to add this role in. And it didn't cost me quite as much because I didn't have to pay the wages that you would pay for a teacher, so to speak. So I wasn't on a step and ladder. I didn't have a union that I had to work with regard to the placement of this person. It cost me actually less to hire them through the college, their contracted service, than it did for me to replicate that strategy on my own. And if I can, I'm going to go back a little bit to one of the other constructs, is that when we're looking at getting a lot of kids, if we're looking at getting a lot of kids through STEM opportunities, then we can't do things the same way we've always done them. So I didn't feel like I could continue to hire typically one counselor for every 600 students if I knew that I needed some services specific to my students that could be facilitated in a little bit different way. Is that answering your question? Can I add any detail there?
No, that was great. Thank you so much.
So I'll go back to the story for Metro. Actually, it's the same for HS squared and Metro. For the students who are matriculating through the pathway, we were monitoring what their interests were inside of the meta pathway. So that's kind of confusing. So let's think of it this way. Health careers is big. And inside of this big, there are specific pathways that students may be interested in. And sometimes it's a matter of exposure. So if we're smart, says Marcy in her head, if we're smart, then we need to look at where are the jobs right now and what's hard to hire for our partners in the community. So for Ohio State, we went with Wexner Medical Center, and they were having a hugely hard time finding qualified phlebotomists. We found out that phlebotomy only takes 3 courses and a test. That was easy for us to implement as components of early college that would count for nursing if the student wanted to matriculate through a 4-year program at Ohio State. It also was in the 2+2 program at Columbus State. So if they wanted to only do the LPN, which is a 2-year version of it, then they could go through Columbus State and those same courses counted. So we were very specific about the exposures to try to fill the jobs that we knew were ready for them. And so what I can tell you from an observational standpoint now, almost 15 years later, but from an observational standpoint, these kids are employed right away, either right away from high school or right away from the completion of their college. And the kids at Metro right now, according to the National Clearinghouse, are completing 4-year degrees at about 80%. Now, Metro at the time, I think it might be a little bit different now, but Metro at the time had 52% of the kids on free and reduced lunch. So that's not typical of a 4-year college completion rate to other high schools with similar demographics. It only happened because we were very planned and purposeful. And a lot of our kids, one of the stumbling blocks for 4-year participation is that they can't afford it. So we purposefully put into the preparation schedule getting ready for college through that college success class. And then we had advisory where we worked on, I led advisory for all seniors. So at the beginning of the year, we surveyed colleges. And then I took them to a private institution close by. I took them to a public institution small, public institution large, so that they could see things other than Ohio State University and see what it feels like, what's the vibe in these different kinds of institutions. Then they were surveying for what kinds of jobs that they might, and they've had a lot of experience and exposure through work-based learning. So what kinds of jobs are they interested in doing, and then what degree attainment would be necessary for those jobs. They're very knowledgeable, so they are good consumers now of college because of all the things that we had done in their preparation schedule. So they picked their top 4, and then they picked a stretch, and then I looked at every single one of their, so me as the principal in my advisory, which is all seniors, I looked at every single one of their college applications, helped them with their college applications, et cetera, or their essays, et cetera. We ended up, the whole time I was there, every graduating class ended up with 90% placement in their first choice. Now, their first choice wasn't always their stretch, so I want to qualify that. Their first choice wasn't always their stretch, but a lot of kids did get into their stretch. They did qualify for MIT and Stanford and Georgia Tech and a lot of other really good STEM-focused colleges. I couldn't believe how many kids went to RPI, and that's pretty far from Columbus. But they loved the environment, they loved the kinds of majors that they could find, and they decided to go and have persisted to degree. So those are the kinds of things that we put into our work in the pathway. So a couple big ticket items for you. One is you can't discount the partnership with your higher ed and your business, your industry partner. It is a necessary thing for work-based learning. It's a necessary thing for college access to have really good and robust partnerships. And quite frankly, it means sometimes meeting every month or every week when a problem arises to try to solve the problem and move forward. But it's remarkably easy for people to say, yes, I want to do that. It's not hard. And if you want, I have one of the, I can send to you, it's pretty large, but I have the startup schedule for STEM pathway that we use to get Columbus City School STEM School up and running, and that we're using right now with our South High School that I used as an example earlier. So if you want, or actually I'll just go ahead and do that for you so that you can see what that looks like, sounds like, and feels like. I'm going to pause to see, I'm going to ask what kinds of things are in alignment with your interests? What kinds of things would you like to know more? Angela or Crystal or Kelty, Lisa, anybody?
Hi, Marcy. It's Takia again. I don't mean to be a question hog, but I'm going to take the opportunity if no one else will. I just would love to know, in terms of the varying interests that students have at that age, knowing that, you know, Ohio State and the medical center may not necessarily be able to absorb all of the students who, for example, went to the South High School, and how did advisors and teachers and staff kind of deal with some of the outliers to the program, you know, folks who may have decided to opt out or people who had interests that weren't necessarily able to be covered by what the offerings were?
That's a great question. Our first role would be to find a near pattern. So what is near what you want to do? What is something like what you want to do? And try that avenue. If the student, I'll take the Reynoldsburg example. If the student at HS Squared says, oh, I've been exposed to a lot of the health careers, I've looked at a lot of the different pathways, I'm not interested in health anymore, I would prefer to go to ESTEM, which is engineering, science, technology, or engineering focused, science STEM school, I'm not talking very well, sorry. It's an engineering-focused STEM school, I'd rather go there. Then at the end of the year, any student can transition to another pathway meta that they want to. We just want to make sure that we are at least able to complete coursework prior to them transitioning into another area, and then they would find the pathway placement for work-based learning. So at eSTEM, then they would be looking at, their partner was TS Tech, and TS Tech makes all the seats for Honda America. And so then they could look at TS Tech placement for their pathway.
Thank you.
Takia, another part that might be helpful for you, we also were pretty generic about the college coursework that the students accessed first.
Right.
We went to like those gen eds, math, English, science, social studies. We went there first, and then once they had a pretty substantial view there, then we let them start matriculating into specific pathways for either credential or college attainment, degree attainment.
Got you. Thanks again.
And you're not a question hog. I love questions. Lisa, how are you doing?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is very interesting. I liked Takia's question. And then do you have some like diagrams of how some of these pathways work?
Yep, and what I'll do next, if it's okay, I'll pull up one of those. So how about if I find out all the things you want, and then I'll pull up the things that you need most based on that. So you would like to see a diagram of how it works.
Right.
What else would you like to see?
No, that's pretty much it, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, that
So
would
I
help
have
me better vision maybe what else I might want to see.
Okay, okay. So let's do that first. So just give me a second, and I'll just keep talking a little bit. If you find something else that you want to talk about, that's fine. If anybody in the group, do you have a STEM pathway already in place? Does anybody have one in place?
We kind of do, but I like yours from the elementary level or from the high school level too.
So what is yours like?
You know, ours is more of an internal thing, and we go bridge, and then we go, you know, I'm the grant manager, so I'm not the STEM expert. So it's more, you know, stackable credentials and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. But we do,
in fact,
have, yeah, we have, you know, college credit or in high schools now.
So the first thing that I'm going to show you, I'm going to go up to share and share my screen. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, well, that's some interesting music. Not sure really what that is. Can you hear me even if I talk over it?
Yeah, somebody has put us on hold.
I'll type to everybody in the chat, please take us off hold. Can everybody see that in the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay. So I'm going to show you a series of spreadsheets to try to help you out. Over here, can you see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
All right. So these are the big buckets that we used. Again, it's a little bit more refined now. We use the rubrics from Jobs for the Future for their Common Instructional Framework. So I'm showing you what it was that we used, and then I'll show you what we're using now. In college-going and career-ready culture, we were measuring ourselves. You see where there's red, green, yellow? We were measuring ourselves against these constructs on a pretty regular basis. So I think this is helpful from a systems perspective, and then I'll show you what the system deployment, like the matriculation schedule, I'll show you that next. Is that okay?
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. So when we're looking at, and I don't know if I'm pointing to it down below, enriched preparation, we're looking at college and career-ready culture, college and career-ready curriculum and instruction. And if we go down, intentional use of time, technology, and assessment to customize instruction and accelerate learning, personalized guidance and support. Those were the areas that we were looking at. And I'm going to send this out to everybody so you don't have to worry about trying to really like, oh, it said this. I'll send it out to you and you can do whatever you want with it. I'll leave it in an open format Excel spreadsheet. But the reason for me showing you this is that we really, from a systems perspective, we really knew the importance of college and career-ready culture and how important it was to build that culture knowing what we were going to be doing with our partners. So where it says physical setup and artifacts in the buildings and opportunities to experience college classes and college life, these kinds of things are not typical or were not typical in our high schools. The students went to high school classes, and if they got all their graduation requirements and their senior year only had to take 2 things, they took 2 things and they went off on their merry way, either to go to work or to hang out. They were, again, the law was against us on that one because many of our kids just could not afford to enter college early because they couldn't afford the tuition. You know, so the way it was, we had to counter the way it was. And what you're seeing here was while we did not have College Credit Plus. So for the students, we needed to make sure for ourselves that we were doing things that made a difference here. And again, many of these constructs were early jobs for the future in their early college work. So that's where these kinds of things came from. I just wanted to make sure that I was telling you that we're bridging a lot more seamless integration now, but it's a good representation. For college and career-ready curriculum and instruction, something that was a tough sell was emphasizing deep learning versus test preparation. I don't know about your states, but in the state of Ohio, we've had assessment systems in place where students had to demonstrate, and it's tied to teacher performance and teacher evaluation. Across the state, it's legislated, it has been since 2004. So because of that, it's kind of high stakes for teachers, and when you don't know what you don't know, you do what you do know, and that sometimes is you prepare them for what is exactly on the test as best as you can. Even if you don't know what the questions are, you know how the questions are asked, and we'll just give it to them a whole bunch. And unfortunately, our students were not performing any better with that particular strategy. The change in student performance was kind of static for several years because it wasn't being done in a way that engaged students to want to have the efficacy to do deep learning. Right now we're calling that accountable classroom talk, and we're looking at collaboration among students. So what we want from a questioning standpoint, which is another part of the Common Instructional Framework, we want students to be able to ask their own questions. We want students to be able to take the curriculum and then explore it with regard to a career pathway or a career operation, a career opportunity. I said operation, meant opportunity. Sorry about that. So we want to make sure that we're able to do that. So for our curriculum, remember curriculum is what the standards are. Curriculum is 3 parts. It's the assessment, it's the deployment, and it's the standards. That's how we look at curriculum. So we want to make sure that the curriculum isn't overly emphasizing state assessments and under-emphasizing the opportunities that come from deep and rigorous learning and knowledge and skill. And so a big change, an early change, is what we're now calling a common instructional framework, where we get the kids more into, or more deeply into, a curriculum that is engaging. It's focused toward high career indicators, toward jobs in high opportunity career areas. This is what we needed to change, and it's one of the foundational things that we had to do. Our schools at first said, oh yeah, we do that. And then when you ask for evidence of, oh yeah, we do that, sometimes we didn't have very robust indicators. And here's where your college and your business partners can come to the table to assist. So we had some meetings. I'll go back to my Metro example. It's the one that I spent the longest time on. We had some opportunities and some very tough dialogue where we had teachers at the table, we had professors at the table, and we had industry professionals at the table. In this case, engineering professionals from a local engineering or local construction company called Rusili. It's actually about a $500 million construction company. They do industrial construction. So this pretty large construction company had a lot of need for project managers, for civil engineers, for structural engineers, and electrical engineers. And they could not find them, and people didn't necessarily want to move to Columbus and stay in Columbus because they wanted their employees to be employees for life. They'd have people that were high-powered and went to great schools, but they came to Columbus and then got experience and then went someplace else. And so they were having a constant turnover for the people that they could find, and they had a lot of jobs that they just couldn't fill well. So we sat at the table and we talked about math. And it was kind of hard for the teacher to sit there and talk with people and say, yeah, but every student should use point float form. And not understand that point float form was the component of what the structural engineer needed to do in order to make sure that the beam was level and secure and the right tensile strength and et cetera. So the teacher was able to hear how these things really worked in industry and could no longer rely on, okay, I'm just going to teach point float form, direct instruction, kids will do it, they remember it for the test, and then they go on. Those kinds of contexts are hard. They're hard. They're hard to arrange, they're hard to focus on, but for me as the leader of the school, the principal and the chief academic officer, I had two hats. For me, I had to make that time available, and I had to be in it with them to make sure that we helped the teachers and the partners to understand where we were and what we needed to do. Now, from those came project ideas. I'll give you two examples for project ideas. We were also problem-based learning entity, so it helped us to have these partnerships to get real-world ideas of what the kids needed to be able to solve. So here's one example. This is a different company, but also an engineering and design firm. They had the opportunity to work for the CDC to design a package that could help take the polio vaccine across very desert areas or very desert climate areas of Africa. The vaccine itself has a certain degree range because of the live cultures. It has a certain degree range that it's stable in, and once it gets above it or below it, then it is no longer viable as a vaccine. And they were having trouble being able to port it across large regions without refrigeration units. And so this company wrote an RFP, was given the RFP for design work to try to make a container that could do this. They did, and they needed several different versions of the container, and they were part of our partnership for our engineering course. And they said, hey, let's see what the students can think of. And so one of the areas that they were interested in is something that someone could carry. Now, the technology that they created would work for something that someone would carry if it had certain dimensions. Our students designed the carrying case that they had a competition among students, and then they picked one, and they actually are using that, and those 2 students that made that design are part of their patent now for that particular element, and it's being used in Africa right as we speak. So these opportunities would not have happened if we hadn't been sitting at the table with teachers, with the college, actually this is the engineering college, and with our engineering design firm partner to talk about the curriculum that we had at the school. You know, that opportunity only came because we had those conversations. If I went out and said, hey, Company X, let's have some partnerships with our students and you, they would say, oh, okay, they can come and shadow, but it might not be deep and it might not be real rich work-based. So knowing that that's the case, we went another direction. We got people who were committed and engaged in making sure that we were successful in providing educational opportunities for our students in our school. So they kind of came in at a philanthropic way, but with no money request. And then once they saw what the kids could do, then they started giving us opportunities for the students to be able to do stuff. So is that answering your question? Would you like more examples like that?
That was good.
Okay. Do you want another example, or would you like me to go on with what is on the screen right now?
Yeah, no, you can go on.
Okay.
Marcy, before you go on, I have a quick question, and this is to Kia again. You mentioned having the potential partners and the teachers, et cetera, around the table. With those types of gatherings, would that have then sparked either advisory board or steering committee type groups where you're working together consistently to continue to plan, to continue to bring in new partnerships? And if so, are those individual per each high school, or is that maybe something that's overarching that is more of a bigger collaboration that happens on a regular basis in terms of planning and implementation?
So that's a good question. That's a very good question. It's both. The answer is both and. So the steering committee for each of the meta pathways, the bigger pathways, and this is true for all of the schools that we're working with. The steering committee is specific to the big pathway. So you might have engineering people on it. You might have, like, let's say it's just generalized STEM. You might have an engineering-focused entity on there. You might have a health-focused. You might have a variety of different people, and that they would come to the table periodically, maybe quarterly, as a big group, and then have smaller groups that meet for specific opportunities and or curricular areas. So we had at Metro Early College, we had what was called the Metro Partnership Group, and the Metro Partnership Group was the bigger group, and we met 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not the same as my board, but I had board members on the Metro Partnership Group. Does that make sense?
That does. And
so
just to follow
my board was more about policy.
Okay. Is there anyone specifically tasked with looking for new partnerships?
We did not. It would have been a good idea. I was tasked. We didn't have anybody special. It was me doing it. It was really hard to run a school and jump out and find partnerships. Right. So I don't know that that was the best way to do it, but at the time, that's what I had.
Okay.
Now, in Reynoldsburg, because I knew how hard it was, we do have a partnership coordinator. It's kind of like in a college, it would be a development officer.
Right.
You know, so in other schools, you can have different constructs. I just didn't have enough funding to have extra positions.
Understandable. Thank you.
So in that particular case, they were a big group, and then we met with smaller entities. Like we would say, hey, we need to do a check on our engineering access and our readiness and access. who all is available to meet on Thursday. Then they came to the table. And I had people that didn't ignore me. They came.
Right.
So I was lucky that way, I guess.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm kind of like a gnat. I don't go away. So might be a little of that too. So the big areas were college-going culture. So that's about, you know, how do you talk with your kids? How do your kids talk about themselves? Do you make this part of every day? This is what we do. This is how we do it. All of you are successful. All of you are going to get there. Some of you may do it faster. Some of you may do it slower, but we do not think that any of you are incapable of accessing a good job in a STEM field, either through high school education or college, period. So that was common. The kids had to talk about themselves in that way. We had habits that the students could recite by name each of the habits and how the habits were being deployed in this particular setting. So like if somebody came to the door as a visitor, the mode of operation that we had, we trained the students that if they saw somebody standing at the door and they were in a classroom, they jumped up, but only one person. If somebody else jumped up, you stay seated. But you jump up and you go over and you start talking about the habits and what's going on in that class. You know, so it was one of those things where it just became part of the fabric of everything we were doing. That's what I mean by culture. College and career-ready curriculum, I talked about the articulation and matriculation. We monitored it quarterly at the minimum, sometimes more than that. Intentional use of time, technology, and assessment to customize instruction and accelerate learning. I'll show you an example of mastery learning that was one way to do it. There are lots of ways to do it, but that's our way. That's what we decided would work, and it did work. Personalized guidance and support I talked about when we had our contracted service with the college, with the advisor on working for our students. That was an example of that. It's also an example of personalized of looking at post-secondary bridging. So here's the second area, and I use this with a school, so you're seeing how they were. We were looking for evidence, and we did red, green, yellow based on the evidence that they had available in our asset mapping. So supported dual enrollment, they put themselves as developing, yellow. So when we talk about supported dual enrollment, meaning that if the students were taking college coursework, A, did we make sure that they were ready? B, do they know where all of the attributes of assistance are, meaning where's the tutoring center? How often are you allowed to go to the tutoring center? How often are you allowed to meet with your professor, teaching them about open office hours, et cetera, following up with them about how often have you gone, being able to access their grades. We had to do a special agreement with the college to be able to see it because they were minors. The parents had to say, we want the high school to be able to see my child's grades. The child had to say, my parent is allowed to see my grades. And we didn't enroll them at the time unless they did all of that. And the same thing is true with College Credit Plus legislation. They have to do that. A focus on college knowledge and success strategies. I talked about that with advisory and how we bridged students to college access. We had two things that went on. One was called a roundtable, and the other is called a gateway. And this is in all 5 schools I started. A roundtable is where you get with a close mentor that's not in the school. So it could be someone that's like a remote family member, like an uncle or an aunt, or it could be your boss at work, but it's somebody who acts as a mentor to you that is personally chosen by you as a student. A parent or guardian. They had to have at least one teacher that was not their teacher, and then one teacher that was their teacher, in a round table. And at that time, the student would take these topics that you're seeing here, and they described how ready they were to do the next thing in each of these areas. You know, so we actually had a student version of it with a student rubric, and they would tell you, here's where I'm ready, here's where I'm not ready, here's where I think I can get ready, here's when I think I'm going to matriculate to taking, as an example, Composition 1100, which is the first English class at college. Here's when I'm ready to take Calculus 1152. Now, not all of my kids took Calc 1152. I was just using that as an example. But they did take some college math before they left high school. So the kids would be able to tell you where they were in the round table, and then they would get guidance and approval and attaboys and congratulations, or some kick butt. You know, hey man, you're struggling, and here's what we need to do, and here's the supports that we're going to put in place. So it's kind of like meeting with your dissertation team and an RTI meeting all at the same time, if that makes any sense. So it's like people that are helping you to move forward, at the same time they're diagnosing what's going on and putting some supports in place. And then the second one is a gateway. And a gateway happened when they were ready to matriculate to college coursework, more than one course at a time. So if they were going to take 2 courses in one semester, then we had a gateway. And the gateway is where they had to provide evidence that they were ready for those particular courses. And so a gateway happened 2 times, once when they got ready to do their college coursework with more than one course, so 2 at a time or more. And the second gateway was when they were ready to graduate from high school. Now, gateways involved college professionals, and we worked around a way of doing it so that it didn't cost a ton of money for everybody involved, with the college professors maybe having to pay them. We asked for volunteers, and we didn't go to the same ones all the time. So these are people that the students don't know. These are people that we would recruit as volunteers to come in and help us to help the student know where they are. And we had 2 of our high school faculty, 1 college faculty member, and the advisor, the college advisor, were all in the gateway to make sure that the student knew what it was that they needed to know and be able to do to be successful, but also to measure whether they knew themselves enough to be able to be successful. Those 2 constructs, having a roundtable and a gateway, did wonders on making sure our kids were taking classes and they didn't fail. You know, so we didn't have a high failure rate for our students. Actually, we had a better success rate than entering freshmen at The Ohio State University, which is a selective criteria admissions college, and so that's shocking. You know, these are students that are coming in with a 28 ACT average. Our students didn't have to score on the ACT to take college coursework, and they did better in their coursework than the average college student did when we measured them in a study looking at their coursework. So that whatever we were doing, it was totally engaging for the student because they were in charge of it. They had to advocate for themselves. They had to have the efficacy to say, I am ready or I am not ready. They had to demonstrate with evidence what they were ready to do, and it was so engaging for the adults, and it caused us to get more people to want to do it more often. So that's personalized best bets, focus on college knowledge and success strategies, and supported dual enrollment. First year supports were when we had students who were ready to take a full year of college coursework while still in high school. So full year, full-time college coursework while still in high school. I only had a handful of sophomores over the 6 years that I was the principal that were ready to do this, only a handful, like maybe 3 or 4. Mostly they were juniors and seniors that were ready to do this. And by the senior year, we had large numbers of students that were ready to do this. But we didn't want to not treat them differently because they were taking a heavier load. So supports for earning credits, predictions for completion, making sure we were just in time to assure that they were ready to keep going, checking in on them regularly, and then building attachment to post-secondary education, making sure they knew that they could do it and that they could persist. Our advisor, in conjunction with me, we led most of this work. The structures that we put in place were all at the college. So we used college assets and made sure that we were working with the college assets to help the students. As an example, they have a student success center that has tutoring, and the hours of tutoring, we would go to those periodically to make sure that students knew what to do in order to help. So we would see, let's say, a student who is tanking on a course, we'd talk with them. If they were maybe not turning their work in, then we'd have a different dialogue than if they were just not understanding and performing poorly. So if it was not turning their work in, then we'd go to the Student Success Center and make sure that they were accessing the remediation that they might need so that they can stay on track inside of that course. For the student who needed tutoring, then we would either look at providing tutoring with some of our staff, or if they were more comfortable, or looking at the tutoring center and going with them to make sure that that happened. So these areas tended to be our pathway big tickets. Again, in the enriched preparation, there was a lot of workforce development and work-based learning. In the post-secondary bridging, it was a lot of student evidence gathering and student efficacy. And in first-year support, it was more about triage and making sure that they were confident. So I'm going to pause there and see what feedback you have for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Marcy.
Okay, so I'm going to, oh, go ahead. Sorry, my fault.
I always have questions. So I would just wonder, in terms of looking at what is your metric for student success, are you measuring just those that matriculate and take college courses and are able to be successful once they make that transition, or are you also looking at students who might successfully engage with just the work-based learning portion and become employed earlier than maybe they would have if they had gone through the college portion? What are the factors that you guys are looking at to really associate the student progress with success by the time they graduate?
So I'm going to send you this information because this is what we're looking at now with the 17 high schools that we're working on, are working with this on. So I'll send you that, but I'm going to give you a brief description. So yes, we are looking at both the credentialed and employable and the college credit attainment for 2 or 4 year degree or a 2+2 the same way. So for a benchmark for success, that 90% target that we have is 90% of the students have employable credential in a high need area in this region and or have significant coursework toward a 2 or 4 year degree. So it works the same. We're saying that 2 and 4 year degree is about being employed. You know, so when we talk about it, we're saying, hey, we want you to be employed, and we want you to be employed in the job you want. And the job you want might have a varying degree of education required. Let's figure it out, and let's get you there. And we celebrate all of it equally.
Okay.
Marcy?
Yes.
Okay. I actually have to leave in like 5 minutes, so I just wanted to say thank you. This is very interesting.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for being here.
And I look forward to you sending us some of this stuff.
You'll probably like, oh my gosh, that's too much stuff, you know, go away. But I'm going to give you lots of different artifacts, and feel free to do nothing with them. Or if you want, if you look at them and you're like, hey, I don't understand that, I'll also include my cell phone and my email.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Is there anything else that anybody else is interested in seeing right now? So Joel, is there anything else, or Sarah, is there anything else that you think we need to make sure that we share?
Marcy, I think you've done an incredible, detailed job, and also, you know, big picture, offered your big picture perspective as well. So that mix makes you an incredible and informative expert on these issues. So I think it's fair to say we've gotten everything we would want to answer, but I want to make sure that there aren't any callers on the phone who just last chance here, going once, going twice before we declare a winner of the auction. But I want to thank you before more time passes. So just really thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and for persisting with technological difficulties and for your partnership. Really always appreciate that.
Thank you, and I apologize to everybody again. The internet wouldn't put me through on my wireless, so I had to go in somebody's office and use their computer, so I apologize.
Thanks, Marcy. This has been great, and I look forward to connecting with you to get even more details offline.
Awesome.
Thank you, Marcy. This is Takia for all the answers to my questions. Appreciate it.
Takia, your questions are welcome.
Thank you.
Well, with that in mind, then if there's anything that anybody needs, I can give you my cell phone number right now. It's 614-586-6546. And then I emailed you earlier, but I'll include it in my email again to you with a variety of different things so that you can use them at your will.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a pleasant evening, everybody.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.